Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about this Nike Betsy Ross shoe debacle that's been making its way around the internet. So, for anyone who hasn't heard, basically Nike had planned a new shoe release for 4th of July that was going to be red, white, and blue, it seems, and include a Betsy Ross original colonial American flag on the shoe. And apparently, due to objections, sounds like maybe primarily from Colin Kaepernick about the shoe, that plan was killed and the shoe is no longer being released. And Nike put out a statement saying that they decided not to launch the shoe because they didn't want to offend anyone and detract from the celebrations on July 4th. So many ways to go with this. Number one, anyone who's offended by the inclusion of a colonial American flag on a shoe is not celebrating 4th of July. So there's no way to combine those things. You might say that some people would be offended by it. They're certainly within their right to be offended by it. As a company, you might not want to offend people, but the reality is if half the country is offended and the other half isn't, then killing the shoe is offending one half anyway. So what's the difference? So from that perspective, just kind of ridiculous. From a larger perspective, I feel like this and obviously other things, but this is a pretty damn good signal that this country doesn't exist anymore. We should stop calling ourselves the United States of America. There is nothing united about us at this point. Previous videos I've done talking about the lack of pride in America, all of the protests against America as a country, against the president, against so many different things, just showcase the fact that we are no longer one people. Our elections for many, many years have been very closely to evenly divided to the point that elections like Al Gore and George Bush were, sort of brought to the courts in order to decide them at the last minute. There are obviously objections from the last election where people who supported Hillary Clinton feel like they should have won because they won the overall country popular vote. There's been moves to get rid of the Electoral College. There's been moves to keep Donald Trump off the next ballot for not releasing his tax returns, which it seems insane. But to the broader point, we're not united. We're barely keeping it together. We fought a war, a civil war to keep the country together at some point. I think the divisions have existed at least since then, and I don't know how we continue like this, to be honest. I put out a video recently that was basically making a case for the idea that if we are to stay together, I think we need to reduce the size and reach of the federal government so that anything that the federal government is involved in is something that a sort of supermajority of Americans agree with, which would probably bring us down to some very basic things like you're not allowed to murder someone or attack them physically or steal their property, and anything that does not gain that kind of supermajority, 75, 80, maybe even 90% of the country, then that should be left to the state and local levels so that people can live the way that they want to live in local communities, have the laws that they want to have in local communities, and not constantly be impinging upon each other. The way we are doing things right now at the federal level basically pits one half of the country against the other constantly, and it creates this winner takes all mentality where if you can just get 51% of the vote, then you can start putting in all of your policies, and nobody seems to care about the 49%, which to me seems like a recipe for disaster. Um, but barring some way of doing that, of allowing people to create local rules, and not be constantly forcing each other to follow someone else's rules, I don't see how we stay together. And to be honest, given this scenario and others like it, with the Nike shoe, I don't know if that's possible, because it seems like at least, I don't know, at least a vocal minority, and potentially one half of the country doesn't want to allow that. They don't want to allow people to live the way that they want to live. There is a moral code that this group has, and in a recent video, I argued that it's very similar to a sort of national church or a national religion, and religious organization in the government, that is being tasked with enforcing this moral code. And that anyone who steps outside of that moral code needs to be stopped, whether it's a company or an individual. I don't see how this goes anywhere other than people are no longer allowed to have American flags out publicly. That's the direction we're going in. And in a million other things, we are becoming this dictatorship, of the masses, and the masses being 50 something percent, maybe, if it's actually true that all Democrats actually support these things. And if not, it's a sort of dictatorship of a vocal minority, masquerading as the masses. Either way, it's problematic to say the least, and I'm not sure how long people are going to be willing to put up with it. So, yeah, I am running out of ideas for how we get past this. I don't think that we can continue the way that this is going. I don't think that you can have one half of the country telling the other half how to live. It was the same problem when we had the what was it, the religious right, the forget what the name was of the group in the 80s and I guess early 90s with Newt Gingrich and others, the moral majority, the groups that were trying to sort of tell people how to live, or were trying to censor everything. I agree that government shouldn't be paying for things that half the country disagrees with, but to tell people how to actually live their lives and what they're allowed and not allowed to do on a moral level, seems insane. It seems to me how we had and ended up with living with restrictions around homosexuality for so many years. We're basically going back to that, just in reverse, and that's no better, because it's fundamentally the same. It's just that a different group is now in charge. So I saw a video yesterday about the country of Bhutan, and the video was showcasing that Bhutan has no homelessness, and they have free healthcare for everyone, quote unquote free, because someone is paying for it, but healthcare for everyone. And it was basically being presented as this sort of ideal country. And then it goes through the rest of the things where, by the way, people aren't allowed to marry a foreigner. Everyone is required to wear customary dress for the country, and the customary dress includes some clothing indicator or clothing that indicates what social group you're a part of. So whether you're plebeian or whether you're noble or whether you're a monk, you're now being forced to wear things that help everybody know where you are on the ladder. And oh, by the way, in the 90s, this country also forced about a fifth of their population out of their borders and basically expelled them, forced them to become refugees, and anyone who was left was prevented from running for political office. That's where we're headed, to be frank. That's where we're going. It's just that it's half the country telling the other half that they're not okay. I don't know if at some point all Republicans or conservatives are sort of not allowed to vote, or are we expelled, or are we, I don't know, put through re-education. But that's the way this is going. So unless we can find some framework that allows the two different sides to coexist peacefully and for people to select where they want to live and how they want to live, and to find people who are like-minded and to share space with them, and then to function accordingly. I don't see this going anywhere good. Would love to hear other viewpoints that are more positive, that are more hopeful. I do think in the end we will end up with, if things go sour, then we will end up just seceding, and we'll have two countries, and we'll be able to live the way we want to live, because I don't think that people will accept anything else. I certainly won't accept anything else. But so in the end, I think everything works out. It just doesn't work out the way that I think most of us would like it to, where we are able to remain as a country. I think what we've sort of introduced to the world, what we've accomplished just internally, and the example we've set is enormously important. Um, you know, Obviously, not everything we've done is great. There have been all kinds of issues with our foreign policy. There have been all kinds of issues with our domestic policies. But we have cleaned up many, many, many of them. And we can continue to improve on it. That's not debated. The question is, do we continue to improve, or do we hate ourselves and destroy our country? Those are the choices that we have right now.